You are now tuned in to the newest Bills Mafia production, FamBase Sports. Join Jarek Hall and Kari Demos as they take you around the world of sports. Every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Only on the official network of the original Bills Mafia.
What is going on, sports world? Welcome back to Buffalo FamBase Sports with Jarek Hall and my co-host, of course, with Kari Demos. And we are back here again with another really big episode for you guys because there's a lot of content, guys. There's a lot of content for you guys to work with. Let me tell you something, guys. We got to talk about, of course, Gronk's retirement. We got to talk about college football playoffs. We also have to talk about NBA Finals because, again, we got to talk about the finals in that crazy Game 6 with the Warriors winning it. And, of course, that crazy parade, which is, it might go down as one of the best, most historical parades I think we've ever seen when it comes to NBA history. So we're going to get talk about that. Of course, NBA Draft 2022 is literally right around the corner. So we also are going to make our predictions. Tons of chatter, guys. Tons of chatter and more included details that we're going to talk about here. But, man, Kari, man, how are you doing today, man? What's going on?
Not much, Jarek. Just getting back into the swing of things, and it's been interesting with now that things are now that it's the summertime. It always feels like this is a more lower key, dead period, quote unquote, in sports. There's really so much going on. Whether it's Kyrie Irving making news in the NBA, with potential of him leaving the Nets. Obviously there's rumors now of him swirling of him going to LA, but there's just a lot of different things to discuss. But I'm glad you mentioned the NBA Finals. Just talking about it, and I know we talked about it briefly on Tuesday because we understood the moment that was in front of us potentially. Just knowing that the fact that the Warriors potentially winning a fourth title in eight years was on the docket. So to be able to see that on Thursday night, to be able to see Steph Curry win his first Finals MVP, now, I guess he's legitimized now, to some. I do think he needed it. I do think he needed that Finals MVP to really stamp, his name in history. And now he has, because now, we went one moment going from, Steph Curry, he's great, but this and that, and he had KD win 2 rings with him, and he's never been Finals MVP, and all these things. But you can't say that about him now. And I mean, I really truly believe he's one of the 10 greatest players to ever touch a basketball. At this point, obviously he's the greatest shooter ever, but he's just an all-around dynamic offensive player. Whether getting to the rack, whether it's knocking down free throws, whether it's him just doing what he does from behind the arc. The guy is just special. But again, it was just great to be able to see that. Even as a major LeBron fan, you got to respect greatness. And the Warriors, just all the different stories that they had involved too. Andrew Wiggins, he was a cast off from Minnesota, and obviously he was the number 1 pick, so he's finally lived up to his billing. Jordan Poole being able to really emerge as one of the best 6 men in basketball. Klay Thompson, missing 2 full seasons. Draymond Green, the ups and downs he had in the finals. So many different stories, and Golden State's really not going anywhere, which is super scary to think about.
Yeah, man. I think that, like I said, this could be the start because going into 2023, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know if there's any teams that can really, I guess, knock them off. Now, Golden State has weaknesses of their own. I still feel like Golden State really truly needs a big in there because we saw at times during the finals where Golden State had some, they did not have really good shooting days, and they couldn't really grab the offensive boards. They were getting dominated on the low post, and for the most part, that's where you really kind of see, Golden State's weakness there with Boston with the more athletic, bigger forwards. So I still feel like they need something, but overall wise, I think again they're extremely deep. Again, you mentioned it. You saw Jordan Poole there. How he was able to emerge the 6th man. How Stephen Curry was extremely effective during this finals. And not just that. Really the question was can Stephen Curry really show up and win an MVP for the finals? But besides that, Stephen Curry has been extremely flawless. Klay Thompson's, like I said, I still feel like he's getting back into form because He's just about a couple years removed from two back-to-back horrific knee injuries. So I still feel like he's still getting the form. Draymond Green is going to be Draymond Green for the most part. He's going to be the person that's going to be the distributor. He's going to be he's going to be the rebounder. He's a great defender, not the greatest scorer in the world, but kind of a guy that for the most part can change the momentum of a game based off of his play on the court. And just so many other guys. I mean, you look at Kuminga. For the most part, you look at Kevin Looney, how he was able to kind of impact his team. Golden State was just extremely deep this year, and again, it was just a combination of just experience with youth, going into 2023. When I look at some of these other teams that can challenge them, Boston for the most part, we got to include them in the conversation because they were competitive with Golden State this year, and a lot of those guys will be the same. But Milwaukee for the most part, Chris Middleton, he wasn't healthy for the most part for these playoffs. It was literally just the Giannis show. But I feel like that kind of really exposed exactly kind of weaknesses that Milwaukee has without Middleton. And Giannis, of course, if they miss Giannis, I don't even think they really go that much far. But Chris Middleton is more of a kind of a borderline star player, and the fact that when they were missing him as their second best player, that they just couldn't really have an answer. I feel like I just don't really know if I can really include Milwaukee in the conversation yet. Really, Memphis is probably the only team that I would say has the potential because I like their team top to bottom. I just felt like they just missed they missed their superstar point guard in John Morant. So I feel like Memphis is probably the only team that I would probably put in that conversation. But for the most part, I mean, I look at some of these other teams that can maybe not, that could just challenge Golden State. I just don't see a lot. Again, we're gonna have to see during the offseason what happens. LeBron James potentially getting Kyrie Irving to the Lakers. Will LeBron James even stay at LA? He hasn't really re-signed with them yet. He kind of have to work some things out. But if he does stay, obviously there's the Kyrie Irving reunion, and to see if what will happen with that. Whether if Anthony Davis is going to stay in LA for the most part, and just tons of other stuff going on in the offseason to see who can go in there and potentially knock off Golden State there. So, but just going off and I guess talking about Boston real quick because they were heavily involved in this finals. Again, Jason Tatum for the most part he's gotten it. I mean, he has gotten it because Jason Tatum, man, he's put up a crazy stat, man, where he had the most turnovers in NBA Finals history. And this is from LeBron James playing in 10 finals. Bill Russell playing in 13 finals. I mean, you look at, Wilt Chamberlain, the greatness of Wilt Chamberlain, Shaquille O'Neal playing in, I think, around 6 NBA Finals. Michael Jordan, 6 NBA Finals. Kobe Bryant, 7 finals. I mean, some of the greatest players that have played in multitude of finals, and Jason Tatum had the most turnovers. So, obviously, I don't know if the moment was too big for him. Maybe if he was a little nervous. I don't know if I don't know what really happened with Tatum for this series because typically you just see a lot of mistakes that he's just not really, he's not. I will say this: Tatum is not really a ball handler that he's known for being extremely protective. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, to have the most turnovers in finals history is just it's head scratching because it's like you don't really see this from him. And you look at Jaylen Brown. I mean, like I said, he stepped up. Jaylen Brown, I feel like was really good this finals. I think some of the biggest moments that's where I think he can step up from. Marcus Smart was inconsistent, and not just as a shooter, but as a defender, I felt like he was a little inconsistent as an on-ball defender. Al Horford, for the most part, we all knew how much of an impact he can have when he's on his game. I felt like it was kind of the same thing too, where there were a couple games where they really kind of needed him stepped up, but Grant Williams as well. But I feel like Derek Williams for the most part really stepped up for them. He was huge for them this finals. I felt like he was great for them, pretty much great for them in every game. But the Celtics showed their youth, and I think Golden State really showed their experience. That when Golden State, when things got rough, they didn't really just panic. Stephen Curry didn't have pretty much a great he had a great game except for of course Game 5 where he didn't even make a three. Klay Thompson had his struggles. Pretty much every single player on that team had their struggles, but yet somehow, some way, Golden State was able to find their composure and they were able to lift up the trophy. And I feel like that is a combination of experience for some of because a lot of these players were on some of those final teams. And I think a lot of those other players were on that Golden State team where they, where they had to fight for a play-in, where they weren't even close to making the playoffs. They were one of the worst teams in the NBA at some point. So I feel like a combination of all those factors were able to help Golden State win to win a trophy. And I think when you look at Boston, they've always been a team that's been close. They've been there, but in some of the biggest moments, that's kind of where you kind of just see their youth flash right before their eyes. And again, the good thing is that a lot of those players are young. Marcus Smart signed an extension. Jaylen Brown signed his extension. Jason Tatum at some point. I think he actually did. Did he get a max contract yet?
You saying Tatum?
Yeah,
Yeah, I believe he signed that. Was that last summer?
last summer.
I believe that was last summer.
So yeah, he's going to be there for a while. So a lot of their core players are going to be there, for a while. I mean, I just think the question is when is the exact time? When's the right time? Right? Is this kind of the Russell Westbrook, the big three with OKC with Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, James Harden, where they've only been there once, they didn't really capitalize, and then all of a sudden they just they kind of fall off the moment? Or is there going to be a team where they get better, they get mature, they get the more mature, the more experience they get, and maybe a couple more pieces that they can add? That's when they can finally make their finals run. So it's a tough run for Boston. Again, it's their first finals since the Paul Pierce, KG, and Ray Allen days. But again, I think the good thing is that a lot of their core players will be back. A lot of their rotational players will be back, and I think they just need to add a couple more pieces, and they definitely need to get better from beyond the arc because like I said, they're great on-ball defenders. They're great with rebounding. They're athletic as all heck, but they just got to get better from outside the perimeter and just be a little bit more consistent. But yeah, congratulations to Golden State, man. Like I said, the parade, I don't know if you want to touch upon it, but that parade was madness, absolute madness.
Yeah, it really was. I'll get to the parade in a sec. First point that I wanted to get to is, something that you mentioned very early in your analysis. Talking about how the Warriors still need size. The scariest thing about that is they have, former number 2 overall pick coming back in James Wiseman. You know what I mean? So like, he's obviously projected to be their long-term center. So once he's healthy, you really could project out a young core of, Wiseman, Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, possibly Gary Payton Jr. or Gary Payton II. Whatever the case is, I mean, the Warriors have shown that they just have such it's like their old they're saying from their original championship runs. The strength in numbers it is real. They really play 1 through 10. All their guys are viable. They might all have different roles, but they're all capable NBA players. I think that's a huge thing. I think their model is so much more attainable than trying to build a big three or okay, let's land this superstar free agent. They built homegrown talents on obviously the skill that Steph and Clay have. Obviously once KD went there, the skill that he brought to the table as well. That's always stood out. But, think about the guys that they brought on and who really developed with their skill. Jordan Poole's developed his skill. Andrew Wiggins obviously was always known as a scorer, but, he developed his skills, on the offensive end where he could be more efficient, but then also, expanding himself as a defensive player. He was always, like we said, he was always considered a score first player, and he became a truly elite two-way player. I mean, talk about the struggles that Jason Tatum had. You can look directly to Andrew Wiggins. I mean, the Warriors defense as a whole was very underrated, but just the simple fact that Wiggins, when he was matched up on Tatum, he took that assignment and did it about as well as anybody could ever have imagined. So like I said, the strength in numbers really just showed. I think that's what really was the biggest difference with Boston and Golden State. Boston, again, very top-heavy, talented team. And you mentioned, the issue with Tatum, with him turning the ball over, a record number of times in the finals. I think that's a byproduct of, yes, the Warriors defense, yes, Andrew Wiggins, but also, too, just the fact that the Celtics don't really have a true point guard. Obviously Marcus Smart is an elite guard defensively. He's an energy guy. He's a locker room culture guy, but he's not a true traditional, set the table floor general type of point guard. He's just not. He's really a combo guard. He can play off the ball, on the ball, so that he brings versatility and obviously defensive player of the year. So he's a phenomenal player, and it's no discrediting him. But the one thing that the Celtics, you mentioned the shooting. That's a huge, huge part of it as well. I think they had some inconsistencies with their shooting, which was apparent. But I think an even bigger issue is the fact that they don't have a true point guard. This is what happens when Kyrie Irving leaves, and this is what happens when Terry Rozier heads out, and Kemba Walker's knee falls apart. You know what I mean? The Celtics, I commend them because, and Isaiah Thomas as well. I mean, it's really crazy to think, in the span of 5 years, to think that Isaiah Thomas was an MVP candidate. You swap him out for Kyrie Irving. He deals with his injuries, and it's Kyrie. And then, Kemba Walker, his situation as well. And then even Dennis Schroeder, So I applaud the Celtics for trying. They've thrown as many darts at the wall as they could have over the last 5 years, but they just haven't been able to get the point guard position right. So I think, one step in them getting to that point is potentially, moving, whether it's moving Marcus Smart back to the 2 and bringing in a point guard, or bringing in, or maybe even just, letting things develop with Peyton Pritchard, or allowing him to expand his role, whatever the case is. But I think that was really truly the biggest thing missing from them. But again, just talking about the Warriors, getting back to the champs, getting back to the parade. I mean, how authentic of a parade, how authentic of a time was it? First of all, please, by all means, anybody watching this, please, we need to protect Klay Thompson at all costs. He's a national treasure. He's an international treasure at this point, man. Starts the day off, loses his hat on the boat. Then he's doing the Michael Jackson dances in the street with the title. Almost loses. Oh my goodness! And almost knocked over that fan. That was crazy. And then he almost loses one of his championship rings. Like, the guy is just But on a serious note, like, to see him come back. I've always said, Klay's my favorite Warrior because he does all the dirty work. He's a, great. Well, he's getting back to that level, but great defensive player. If number 30 wasn't lining up at point guard, knocking out all the threes he has, who knows? Klay Thompson may be the guy, setting all the NBA 3-point records, because he really is that elite of a shooter. And it's been a treat to be able to see him come back and become the player we, at least somewhat remember. He's not 100% yet, but to at least be such a strong contributor to the title team that he was, it was great to see. But yeah, what a great parade. Draymond Green speaking his mind as always, and it's been so funny. He's been taking shots on Twitter of people, and the funniest one to me was when he, was like, Game 7, locked in, Happy Father's Day, y'all. Like, that had me cracking up so hard, just because, obviously we know the series was wrapped up on Thursday, but, for him to be able to make light of the series after, the ups and downs he had in the series, and to be able to nab his 4th title, I really truly think now this just is another feather in his cap. There was a lot of chatter about, is Draymond Green a Hall of Famer? I mean, at this point, how can you deny the man? I mean, 4 rings, Defensive Player of the Year, former All-Star. The guy just, all he does is win. He may not be the biggest scorer in the world, but he affects every other aspect of the game, literally. So, I just think that, for him to be able to get that ring, and even for Coach Kerr, Steve Kerr, I think, to really cement himself. He's obviously been established for so long, had a highly successful NBA career as a player, but to really just continue on and expand on the dynasty that he's built from the ground up. We talked about it last week. He's been a part of just about all of the major dynasties in the modern era outside of the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. And he's really, all he does is win at this point, so it was exciting to be able to see those guys, just finish things off the way they did. And, seeing some of the outfits and stuff, seeing Jordan Poole with the Oakland jersey, and, seeing Steph Curry and Aisha, Aisha with the Curry jersey suit, and same with Damian Lee, who his wife is actually Steph's younger sister, I believe.
Yeah.
So crazy how connections work like that sometimes. But yeah, it was was a treat to see, and shoot, it might not be the last golden parade we see over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people in the media are definitely taking shots at the parade because they don't like how pretty much these players are moving. But listen, man, when you win a championship, man, and you drink the amount of champagne that you have been, I mean, like I said, you're gonna go to the parade, you're gonna be you're gonna be turned up, man. You're gonna be turned up, you're gonna be a little tipsy. So I don't know. It's like for me, and that's just authentic. Like I mean, like what do you want these players to act? I mean, you're in a parade. You're celebrating with the fans. I mean, like I said, you got the champagne, you got literally everything right next to you. I mean, how do you expect these players to kind of act? I think again, people don't like a majority of the media just did not like how Draymond Green was taking shots because he's not just wasn't at the parade, but of course he has his own podcast. He works with the Volume with Colin Coward, and he's been so he's a guy that's he's heavily involved in the media compared to a lot of the other Golden State players that are on that roster. So he's heard a lot. We've watched a lot. He's heard people kind of talk right behind his back. So again, he took a lot of shots at a lot of people from the media, especially from a lot of people that said that Golden State wouldn't even make the finals anymore. I mean, so yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, it's in a way, it's revenge is kind of sweet for Draymond. So I don't listen. I don't blame these players. I don't blame Draymond for what. I mean, that's what he's always done. That's the type of player. That's the type of person that he kind of is. He's a dude that if there's any player that's kind of that added. I mean, you look at the Dennis Rodmans, the Kevin Garnett's of the world. I mean, especially when KG won his championship. I mean, he was going nuts, going crazy when he won his title. I mean, there's different personalities. Not everyone's gonna act like LeBron James. Not everyone's gonna act like the typical nice guy that that a lot of the media wants to kind of hail. I mean, not everyone's gonna act like Tom Brady when they win a championship. I mean, you're gonna see a lot of real personalities, a lot of authentic personalities that we just haven't really seen that much really start to show. And Draymond Green is just he's just been that rare outlier. He's just been that guy. I mean, he's just showing himself. I don't think for the most part he's not afraid to really hide it. He's just he doesn't really care that much whether if he gets fined or not. Very similar to Marshawn Lynch, where he's just gonna act like himself. He's not gonna be somebody else. And honestly, I respect that, man. I like that's why that's what I really truly love about Draymond Green. Now to others, they may hate it. I mean, that's why I think Draymond Green is one of the more loved slash kind of hated players in the league. But it's what makes Draymond. And at the end of the day, he is like you said it best. He is a future Hall of Famer, and for the most part, I mean, just congratulations to him, man. Like I said, celebrate it. So, I think we're going to change up gears, though. We're going to switch up a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the draft because that is up. That is literally right around the corner. And listen, man, I look at this NBA draft, and this is probably one of the years where I'm like, I'm just not too sure who's going to go first overall. I feel like the last 2 to 3 years, you kind of knew who was going to be the top prospect, which one was going to be the one overall pick. But for this draft, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not too sure who it's gonna be. I mean, before where everything before the college basketball season started, typically the number one high school basketball recruit is gonna be the number one dude the following year. I mean, it's not like college where you have to wait 3 years. You can literally come. I mean, before back in the day, you could just come out of high school and then enter the NBA depending on your age, and you could still be the number one overall pick. I mean, you saw LeBron James was that dude, Kobe Bryant. In a way, was kind of that guy. You look at some notable, Tracy McGrady was another notable name. Dwight Howard, another notable name, J.R. Smith. But now, again, I mean, for the most part, you play 1 year in high school. You don't even have to do great. You can literally just do fairly decent and still be the number one overall pick because they just love to base it off your potential, not really the stats that you put up at the college game. So, Kyrie, man, I mean, talk to me about some of these prospects. Who you kind of going to have number one overall, and just kind of a little bit of some of the notable names that you kind of like for of course going to some of these teams in this draft.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a pretty unique draft class. I know everybody talks about the big man is dead and this and that, but I mean, I could really disagree with that. Obviously just seeing what Joel and Embiid did, leading league in scoring this year, seeing Jokic win his second straight MVP award. Giannis Antetokounmpo, I know he's played guard in his, in the past, but he's really a big, he's a power forward. So like, those are easily three of the top 10 players in the NBA today. And those are big guys, but those are big guys who are versatile and have a lot of skills. So that's why guys like Keegan Murray and Paolo Banchero are guys that are really claiming a lot of attention right now and claiming a lot of the headlines. I think the guy that'll most likely go number one overall though is Jabari Smith. Just keeping that theme of big men going. He's 6'10", 220. He's got a more slender frame, but he plays. He's one of those guys that his position is almost fluid. He's listed as a power forward, but has the skills where he can handle the ball. He averaged a couple assists per game, and he shot 43% from deep. So whether he's a stretch four or it's just a floor space around the wing, I think he's going to have a lot of value. But at 6'10", he's got the frame to be able to continue to keep growing, and I think the sky's really the limit. He's gotten a lot of comparisons, to guys like Michael Porter Jr. Similar to a guy like Lamar Odom, even where he could do a little bit of everything offensively. But he really is truly an elite shooter. That's really the biggest thing. I think he'll just continue to grow. Obviously defensively, he's got to have some type of presence as well. So I think he needs to continue to go there. But outside of that, he's really a guy that I think is going to be, a mismatch nightmare in the NBA for years to come. I really think as a guy like him, you rarely see, it's like Kevin Durant. You rarely see big guys being able to put the ball in the basket like that from deep so well and so easily. So I think he's going to be a guy that whether he becomes LaMarcus Aldridge or whether he becomes Kevin Durant, that remains to be seen. But I think at the end of the day, he's just going to be a guy that will be able to come in immediately right away, be able to score, be able to knock down shots from outside, really be a stretch big, and whatever else he adds to his game from there, the sky's the limit. So, is there any specific player that you're seeing or that you're excited to watch, or a specific landing spot you'd like them to go, anything of that nature, Jared?
Yeah, I look at a couple players. I look at Paulo Material, and then I look at guys like Chet Holmgren. I look at a player like Paulo from Duke. 6'10", 250. A guy that for the most part is I kind of consider a hybrid. I think that's a guy that you can place at the 3 if you want him to, but a guy that can play the 4 or the 5. I mean, I think that Paulo is the prototypical forward. I mean, I feel like he's an athletic forward. For the most part, he has a really, really good jump shot. Solid mid-range shooter. A guy that can definitely grab the boards, long, lengthy type of guy. But I think a guy that can, you can also trust him to, if you want to place the ball, strictly in his hands, he can also be that player. I think he can also be a really decent low post player. I think he can work his way in the post. I think Paulo is the prototypical forward, and I feel like that's something. Again, a lot of people expect a Kevin Garnett, Shaquille O'Neal, just an old school, forward, center. But I feel like, again, the game's changed, the game's evolving. And I feel like, again, if you're a forward or a center, you got to be versatile. You can't strictly just play one position. You got to play other sort of positions. Again, you saw in this finals, Al Horford, back in his prime, was one of the best post players in the NBA. And now, again, as the game has evolved, we kind of got away from that. And now, not just on the offense side of the ball, but the defense side of the ball, you got to check pretty much every position in the game because you just never know. I mean, certain matchups may go in your favor, and now you have to you got to try to be in a situation where you have to try to guard you got to try to guard a Curry. You have to try to guard potentially an Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins for the most part was the best big. I felt like was the best big for the Golden State Warriors. So, again, you got to be extremely versatile. You got to learn how to play a multitude of positions for the offense side and the defensive side. I feel like we are continuing to see that for both the forward, the power forward, and the center position. And speaking of centers, I mean, again, Chet Holmgren, again, the biggest name in this draft, because, again, he was the number 1 overall recruit coming out of basketball. And again, in high school, I mean, you just, there's not a lot of kids like him. That's 7 feet tall, 190 pounds. But man, I mean, this dude literally could handle the ball. I mean, he handled it like a point guard.
Yeah.
Again, he's an amazing in college, especially with Gonzaga, was an amazing defender. He averaged around 3 blocks per game, close to, I think around like 3.5 blocks per game. He was a really, really good 3-point shooter, spot up mid range shooter as well. Um, I think the question for Chet is definitely his size. Because again, you look at the 195 pounds. Again, a lot of people, compare him to Chris Stapps, Porzingis, but even Porzingis coming out he was 220 coming out. And a lot of people, questioned his size then. So, Kevin Durant was kind of the same. Kevin Durant was around 215 coming out of Texas. Chet is 195 pounds. And, very similar to Devontae Smith, is that it's just one of those frames that no matter, I just don't, again, I don't know if he can really is capable of packing the size. Now, again, he's 18 years old. I'm sorry, he's going to be 19 years old. So he has room to grow. He has room to continue to try to grow and get bigger. But, you have other players, like Devontae Smith, where, they just don't grow that much. I mean, for the most part, you can maybe add around 5 pounds, maybe best 10 pounds. But besides that, I mean, I think, as far as the frame goes, what you see is what you're going to be getting. So, for Chet Holmgren, it's going to be interesting to see where he kind of goes. I think I like him a little bit more in Detroit, only because I think Detroit is starting to get a little bit better. I think they're starting to address some issues from the point guard and forward position. And I feel like they definitely need a center, and maybe you get a guy like a Chet Holmgren, who for the most part, worst case scenario, he's going to be. I think he can be a solid stretch big in this league. I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but I think as a solid stretch five or potentially a stretch four, I could also see that as well. You also kind of mentioned Jabari Smith. Again, another stretch four for the most part. I think can also be really solid as well. Again, Keegan Murray. AJ. You look at a guy like an AJ Griffin. At 6'6", 220 from Duke, another kind of Duke forward as well. Pretty much your prototypical three, who could pretty much do it all for you. But just like how I mentioned earlier, I look at this NBA draft and I don't see anyone that's superstar material. And again, typically, you can see it, like you can sense it. I'm not too sure for this draft. I think there's going to be a lot of that. This draft has the potential of having a lot of really good players. Just not too entirely sure if there's going to be anyone that really just jumps off the screen right off the gate as a rookie. I mean, like I said, you could have someone that's, averages, 14, 15 points per game. Pretty much we see that for rookies. But maybe, looking at this draft, 3-4 years from now, when you're looking for the next superstar, I'm just not too sure if we can see it yet. But, again, I'm trying to go back and think. I think the 2013 draft didn't really have a lot of huge names for the most part. If I could, I'm trying to think, because that 2013 draft, I didn't think there was any huge notable names from that draft, and yet we were able to kind of get a couple of huge players there. But for the most part, we're gonna have to see, man. We're definitely gonna have to see. It's just gonna be interesting to see who's gonna be that number one overall. I mean, for the most part, Jabari, it looks like he could be that dude, but you just really never know. You just really never know. And this could be a very similar situation, very similar to the NFL draft, where late in the process, you hear some huge names that you just never thought would be the number one overall pick just step up. I mean, I would say like maybe a month or two, no one expected Trayvon Walker to be number one overall pick in the NFL draft. Everyone expected it was either between Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson. And, we all of a sudden we look at the NFL draft, and Trayvon Walker went all the way to Jacksonville. So we'll see what happens, man. But any more thoughts you got for this?
Yeah, for sure. And for those of you out there wondering, man, that 2013 draft class is abysmal. There are a few names, like Giannis was selected, but he was 15th overall. Who would have ever expected to become a superstar? CJ McCollum was 10th overall. Victor Oladipo went second, but again, like even him, like he obviously had his moments in Indy. Hasn't been the same player since his injuries have really been piling up. But just talking about, I'm really glad you brought up, those guys with Ben Caro and Chet Holmgren, because the fact that their skill levels, their versatility, being able to handle the rock. I mean, point forwards, that's a big deal now. I mean, you see point forwards, whether it's Draymond Green, whether it's LeBron James. I talked about Lamar Odom earlier. Obviously, he's out of the league now, but DeMarcus Cousins is able to handle the rock as a big guy. We talked about Giannis being able to handle the rock. As a former
Yeah.
point guard, now
Jokic.
power forward. Yeah, so I think that versatility is huge. So yeah, we'll definitely see how it goes. With these guys being able to assimilate into the league. I really would like to see as well how a guy like Jaden Ivey makes the transition to the league as well. He's really the top guard, considered the top guard in the class, and there's really not a ton of other guards that are breathing down his neck in terms of being the top guy, top guard at least selected. So we'll see how it goes with that. But yeah, I do agree. I just think that versatility, is key. Versatility is huge, and if you're not able to show that you have a level of versatility, you're going to pigeonhole yourself. I do think a guy like Chet Holmgren, um, at the very, very least, is going to be, an all-star level player that, maybe he's a little bit more limited. Maybe he's, not your number one go-to scoring option or anything like that, but he'll be able to anchor defense and, show that that his length is something to be reckoned with. Because I don't know too many guys with, obviously 195 pounds and 7 foot is not the greatest formula in the world, but when you have a 7'5" wingspan, I do think that even if it's 10 to 15 pounds that he adds to his frame, he's one of those guys that, I think too many times historically we've overhyped or overanalyzed, a guy's frame. Because, like you said, with Devontae Smith, even, obviously, not the biggest guy in the world, he was still an effective receiver last year in the NFL. Even as a guy that was playing in a super run-heavy offense with, a quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who made some improvements, but wasn't the most polished passer in the world. So, I really do think though that Holmgren and Ben Carroll and all these guys like, and actually just going off of that, that's made me think of the point you mentioned about the superstars. Like, you know, this class, I do think it's good. I do think it's got some depth. I don't see, like you said, I don't see as many superstars. Like, especially when you think about the 2021 class, where you've got Cade Cunningham, you've got Jalen Green, you've got Evan Mobley, you've got Scotty Barnes, all these guys, Franz Wagner, like all these guys that showed that they are legit NBA players and can be all NBA type players in a few years. So it'll be interesting to see if these guys can live up to the lofty expectations that the 2021 class had. But I do think that this 2022 group is good, and there will be some guys that play for a long, long time to come.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. So, like I said, we're gonna find out everything for the NBA draft. It should be exciting, and definitely tune in. Definitely for everyone who's not who's interested, but maybe not too sure if they're gonna check out the draft. Definitely for sure check out the NBA draft. It's gonna be a fun one. But move on to the next topic. Something that honestly for a lot of us we keep we're used to this. We keep hearing this. And honestly, I'm not even too sure if this is really going to be true or not. But we're talking about, of course, Rob Gronkowski's retirement. Because, yes, the former Williamsville great, Rob Gronkowski just announced his retirement. And, we'll see. We'll definitely see for Rob Gronkowski to see if he's going to stay retired. But, Kyrie, man, give me your thoughts about Rob Gronkowski. Kind of just, I guess, recap his career. And do you think he's going to stay retired or not? Because now this is kind of, the second time this has happened. And I don't know, because it seems like he still has a lot left in the tank. Brady's still playing. So what do you think about it?
For sure. First and foremost, shout out to to Gronk, Robbie G. I actually got to meet him in high school. I wanted to go down memory lane a little bit. One of my friends who has muscular dystrophy, he's a huge Patriots fan. Shout out to Tafiq. He was, so the program that we were helping run, that Tafiq was a part of, we were able to, our advisor of the program was able to get Gronk to visit the school. So, couldn't have been a nicer guy. Obviously, a big goofball as well. But it was great to meet him, and it really just brings that much more, that human element to a guy like him, because he's a mythical fixture and creature when it comes to football. To be as dominant of a tight end as he was, not just as a receiver. We obviously know all he did, catching touchdowns from Brady throughout the years. But I mean, the guy was essentially a third tackle on the field, and I always say, when they start saying, oh yeah, so and so is he's like a baby Gronk, or oh he's in the mold of a Gronk where he can block really well and is a good receiver, like that's when you're in elite, transcendent territory, because he's a guy that clearly was the gold standard for the tight end position as a player, even as banged up as he was, even with the forearm casts and broken kneecaps, and all the injuries that he suffered through all the years. He continued to battle and show that. My apologies on that, but yeah, he just for him to be able to continue to battle on. I just think also too what adds to his legacy. He leaves New England. He teams up with Tom Brady after taking a year off, wins a title, and then last year, had one of his best seasons since dating back to his days in New England. Over 800 yards receiving. I believe he had 7 touchdowns as well. I mean, phenomenal talent. I really, I've had so many debates with friends about this over the years. There's so many different ways you can look at it. I think in terms of like a full scope career, obviously Tony Gonzalez, what he's done, as an NFL player, as a tight end, he's the gold standard in terms of, if you're to have one tight end's career, it's his. I did like the Chargers a lot as a kid, so watched a lot of Antonio Gates, so I'm a huge fan of him, and ironically, Kellen Winslow Sr. too. I think those two guys are, two of the greatest tight ends to ever do it. But when it comes to Gronk, I really just truly believe, he's the most dominant tight end there's ever been, because it's like how Shaq was with the NBA, most dominant center. Yeah, there was Wilt, yeah, there was Bill Russell, yeah, there was Hakeem and Kareem and all these guys, that had phenomenal careers, but like everybody knew in his prime, nobody was more dominant than Shaq. And I think the same goes for Gronk. He's a mismatch nightmare. I mean, what are you going to put a safety on him? He's too little. You're going to put a linebacker on him. He's too slow. You got to double him. Okay, that's cool. Brady will find someone else. So it really just, and the fact that, like I said before, for him to be, I mean, truly a dominant blocker, like, you can line him up on the end of the line of scrimmage, and again, he's like a third tackle for you. So I just think in terms of pure overall dominance, I just don't think anybody really compares to Gronk. I actually wanted to take a look at this quick because Gronk, it'll kind of show just how dominant the guy has been. Let me see. So obviously Gronk is one of the leaders all time in terms of scoring touchdowns from the tight end position. So number one all time is Antonio Gates with 116. Number 2 is Tony Gonzalez with 111, and third is Gronk with 93. Right. But when you think about it like this, Antonio Gates played 236 games in his career. Gonzo played 270. Gronk played 143 games in his career and still is third all time. So he's played, 130 roughly less games than Tony Gonzalez and about 90 games less than Antonio Gates, but it still is only 20 touchdowns off from those guys. Like that, again, like I said, that just goes to show the guy, whenever he was on the field, he was dominant, and we salute to him. But I don't know. I think we're in weird territory when it comes to these returns because, on one end, yeah, I do think he really truly wants to retire and wants to, ride off into the sunset, whatever the case is, any cliche you can throw out there. But I think with the length of the NFL season now, I know it's only 1 week longer, but it feels that much longer, even adding that week. I think the fact that just knowing that injuries do come into play with things, maybe he does get, maybe Brady does bring the bat signal out for him, later in the season, to say, hey, Gronk, I know you've had your time, let you rest up and all that. Hey, let's make a run for another chip, so I could see it, but I honestly think he's really truly leaning towards retiring, especially knowing all the injuries he did go through, and to think that he did end things on a pretty smooth note in terms of the last couple of years. He definitely dealt with some nicks and knacks here and there, but nothing like when he was in New England. So I think you know that peace of mind of, hey, I got back in and I got back out pretty cleanly. I think that's something that is weighing on him. But again, I do think if the situation's right, if Tampa's rolling and but the tight end position's lacking a little bit, why not bring him back? So it's definitely something that we'll have to keep an eye out for all throughout the 2022 season.
Ooh, apologize. Oh yeah, I don't know, but yeah, StreamYard guys really weird sometimes, but yeah, I apologize for that. But yeah, I know a lot of Bills fans for the most part, not really the biggest fans of Gronk, and I know that for the most part we are Buffalo fan based sports, so I know a lot of Bills fans here and there are really sometimes they could be a little hard on Gronk, especially because again Gronk's the hometown kid, but he did play with the Patriots for over played the Patriots close to about a decade, play with Tom Brady for the most part, and I know a lot of people are not really a fan of his antics, even though I think he's a fun dude to be around. But for the most part, man, I mean, Gronk, he's done things for this community. He's held multitude of events here at Orchard Park and around the city of Buffalo over here for pretty much his entire career here in Buffalo. So, like I said, he still holds a huge place. Not just him, right? Him, his brother, his dad, his brother's his dad. I mean, for the most part, his entire family still holds Buffalo. He holds the city here. So again, you don't really hear that much about it, but for the most part, Gronk, he's held a pretty special play, a pretty special heart, especially for the community. So that's kind of one of the things I have to kind of say about it. Met Gronk once, not in Buffalo, met him in Florida, but for the most part, Gronk's a really, really good dude. And like I said, I wish the best for him. Honestly, you said it earlier. He's one of the greatest players of all time. I think he's the most dominant tight end to ever play the position. I mean, by the time Travis Kelce ends his career, I mean, like I said, he could potentially top Tony Gonzalez. If not, Tony Gonzalez might hold it, but Travis Kelce is probably going to be finished maybe second in his career in receiving yards. And I already know a lot of people will, they'll sip on the Kool-Aid and they'll sit up and say, well, Travis Kelce is better than Gronk because he has more receiving yards, he has more, potentially more receiving touchdowns. But Gronk as just a complete tight end, what he does after the catch, what he does, with his, what he does with his hands as the end line blocker, what he does in pass pro. I mean, he just does it all for you, man. I mean, he is the complete tight end. He does a lot of gritty, dirty things that not a lot of tight ends in this league even does. I mean, for the most part, you look at, you look at hybrid tight ends, guys like Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts, where these are guys that for the majority of the game, they're not playing as inline blockers. They're playing out wide. They're playing either out wide or they're playing in the slot. Travis Kelce, for the most part, majority, a crazy stat was like 72% of the snaps or somewhere around that ballpark is where he played in the slot or he played out wide, not even as an inline blocker. I mean, Gronk, for the most part, did it all, right? But, there were some games where, depending on the team they were playing against, they would just use him as an inline blocker. There were some games where, depending on the scheme, they would use him in the slot. There were some games where they had him out wide, but some games where they even use him sometimes at fullback, and they would kind of use him, as kind of that extra back that you can use coming up the flat. But Gronk, for the most part, he was just great everywhere. The only position where they just didn't really put him at was at running back and quarterback, but he was just that extra tackle. He was that extra lineman, and he was that extra dude that can handle edge rushers if you needed to. If you need to kind of use him there, especially in run blocking situations. And he was one of the most dominant players in that particular area. So, I completely agree. He is the most complete tight end that we've ever seen. I consider him the greatest tight end of all time. Again, and we've had great tight ends. We've had Shannon Sharp. We've had we've had Tony Gonzalez. We had Antonio Gates play for an extremely long time. Kellen Winslow Sr. You just mentioned a little bit earlier, the great Ozzie Newsome for the Cleveland Browns organization. How he kind of Mike how he kind of revolutionized the receiving position, right? Him, Mike Ditka, so many other great tight ends, man. But Gronk was just a different breed. At 6'7", 250 pounds. And again, 143 games, and even with his last couple of years in Tampa Bay, he was on pace for having 1,000 yards on both those years, but he missed 5 games. He would just miss around 4 to 5 games. He there's always those dudes that unfortunately just couldn't really stay healthy. But when
Mm-hmm.
he played, I mean, it was nothing you can do about it. You couldn't really check him. So, Gronk, he is going to be a little bit. He's catching up to those mid-30s. Again, he did miss a lot of time, so I feel like that could benefit in his favor. That maybe can take some hits, but I don't know. I do agree that I think that he's more on the side of contemplating retirement because I think those injuries definitely catch up with him. And like I said, I don't really know Gronk's body. I think no one really knows his body except for his doctors and himself.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of just how he feels about playing the game. But like you said, man, it's hard to say no to Tom Brady, and it's hard to say no to potentially another ring. Gronk. If we just take a look at his accomplishment, I think he has like what 4 or 5 rings.
Cool.
4 rings, yeah. So Gronk has 4 rings, and it's kind of like would you say no to another Tampa Bay Buccaneers run where you have arguably one of the best defenses in the league, one of the best edge rushing duos in the National Football League with Tom Brady, with Mike Evans, with Chris Godwin. You add in so many other pieces. It's like all those guys are going to be back. It's like how can you kind of say no to that? So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see what happens with Gronk. I think again he's a great player, fun human being. I know he's going to try to party up for a little bit, but again, mid-season or maybe even late in the season, it's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to say no. If Tom Brady is on the phone, it's like, hey man, listen, Gronk. We love Cameron Brate, but we would love to have another weapon, and maybe Gronk could definitely come back and maybe add on to another kind of Super Bowl run for potentially for his career.
Yeah, agreed. The Tampa does have a few weapons that they've added. I know Russell Gage is down there now. I know the running game will still be what it is with Leonard Fournette. I know Ronald Jones is down in Kansas City now, but I think that nobody's expecting that offense to really um, take that much of a step back. But I do think you know they would have that much more of an advantage if Gronk was, lining up with those guys this fall. So, like you said, really something that he sticks through with. I know he's waffled on this, the last few years, dating back to he, watching one thing that was interesting watching the Tom Brady documentary, the 10-part series on ESPN, was hearing the fact that he really considered retiring after the 2017 season when the Pats lost to Philly in the Super Bowl. So he's really been dealing with this for a long time. I know the year off that he took in 2019 really benefited him, but I think again, like I said, this is something that we'll just have to keep an eye out for moving forward. Because like I said, the NFL season is unique now. The fact that there are 18 weeks, the fact that there's really an emphasis now for the 1 seed because there's only one bye that comes in each conference now. So I think there's really been a push to keep guys fresher and to really look at it as more of a more of a long-term view rather than a short-term view now, which I appreciate because I feel like other sports have already done that. When you guys were like baseball, putting guys on the injury list, the disabled list, and you've got even a sport like basketball with guys load managing and things of that nature. So I'm glad to see that the NFL is taking some of the steps that it is because some of these guys are getting too beat up. I love the fact I know it was a COVID rule. But and I believe they're going to continue on with it moving forward. But I love the fact that the NFL expanded its practice squad. Just so more guys can have opportunities. When you have more games, more guys are going to get hurt. So you might as well be able to keep more guys on your roster. So again, like I said, I'm glad for that because things are unique in terms of with how guys get hurt and literally any moment guys can get hurt. So I'm really interested to see if he does stay retired. I do think he will, but again, the sky's really the limit. It's we've seen some crazy stuff in the NFL the last couple of years. So Gronk returning probably would be on the lowest end of that. Just knowing how wild the NFL has been since 2021.
Absolutely, man. And before we kind of go on to our next topic, I do want to look at these comments because, like I said, we got some interaction. So, like I said, man, shout out to Neo, shout out to Pharaoh, Money Man Munch. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. D Brown, regular viewer. appreciate you so much for it. And then of course we got Nabil, man. We got Nabil showing a lot of love. Again, we got a lot of Super Bowl chatter. Like I said, I hope so. I would just say that, man. It's been a long time coming, man. It's been a long time coming. So I'm really hoping that we can do it. But yeah, for those who are stopping by from the Jan Sports YouTube channel, thank you guys so much for stopping by to Buffalo FamBase Sports. And if you guys are not subscribed to Buffalo FamBase Sports, please do. Please do. Tons of content creators. We got a huge project that I think it's either out or it's definitely coming on the way. And like I said, there's other really great content creators. Again, for the most part, we got Justice coming on normally at around 9 o'clock. He's been a big help for both of us, and again, he's one of our he's our producer. So for the most part, definitely show him some love at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and of course, other content creators as well by subscribing to Buffalo FamBase Sports. And if you're coming from Facebook and Twitter, definitely, again, we want to shout you guys out because we definitely are not going to forget you. But now, kind of going into the next topic, Deshawn Watson. Of course, there's the latest news about him, about some of the settlements. Kyrie, if you want to try to get go in a little bit more about that, please do, because definitely, again, this stuff is getting more interesting by the day. And at this point, we're just waiting for the NFL. We're just waiting for the NFL to just make their sentence. It just feels like it's coming.
That's a fact. This, as we mentioned last week, this is a saga. This is the definition of a saga. We're at saga level for sure. I just think, that the NFL, it's really the ball's in your court. So for those of you out there who didn't realize, Deshaun Watson obviously has been dealing with these, sexual misconduct allegations. Of the 24 initial cases that he was accused of, he settled with 20 of them today. So that's a big development in terms of just, being able to have, some of this situation behind them. Obviously, not all of the cases have been settled, and I will get to that in a second. But it's a positive development for him, just for the fact of, again, this is something that he's putting behind him, with those specific 20 cases. Having said that, two things need to be considered here. The first is that the NFL, one of its reps essentially came out and said today that, this really has no, really doesn't sway anything in terms of his suspension. They still are reviewing in terms of what they want to do, length of time and games and all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, they announced today that, it really has no bearing on that. But also, too, again, the 4 cases that haven't been settled are actually it's pretty significant, because these are the same 4 women who initially, when there were several other, when it looked like the settlements were coming, in other situations, these 4 women stood on their ground in terms of, not accepting, the settlement. So again, that's something that needs to be accounted for. I think the way Watson has really, I know his intention was to prove his innocence and to, really just fight this thing to the end. Really looks like that's been the worst case scenario for him. It really just has become worse and worse. It just looks as though, like, at this point, this is probably his best option. And it's hard to say I feel bad for him, because when you make mistakes like these, you have to be held accountable for your actions. But I also do feel bad for him in the aspect. I do actually feel bad for him in the aspect of, like, he really truly thought, like, hey, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to prove that, the truth is going to come out. And, as a guy that I was a huge fan of, I rooted for him, even as a, Bills fan, Buffalo native, to hear his story, to go from being homeless and, living in one of Warwick Dunn's house, I think, what is that, Habitat for Humanity, I believe it is, or one of those initiatives that Warwick Dunn was a part of when he was a kid, to go from being homeless to living in one of those homes to, becoming a national recruit, unbelievable college football player and, national champion there, and to, Pro Bowl, all pro type quarterback, to see that progression was unbelievable. And especially just knowing where the state of the Houston Texans were when he made his trade request initially. So just to see it all just unravel this way is really is unfortunate. But again, like I said, you know, you make the mistakes you do, you have to live with the consequences of them. So, you know, just, you know, what are your thoughts on it, Jarek? Just because, you know, obviously, again, we keep talking about it. We probably won't stop talking about it until the suspension comes, and even once the suspension comes, you know, I'm sure that'll just leave us with that much more room for discussion.
Yeah, man. It's like I'm just waiting. It's like it's like you're just. It's kind of like a ticking time bomb. Like you're just waiting for it to just finally just go off. I think
Mhm.
Deshaun Watson, obviously with with his situation. I mean, there's a possibility that more women. I mean, there's been talks that more women could just they can definitely kind of come out because. The long list of women that supposedly Deshaun Watson. I'm not going to sit up and say that it truly did happen, but supposedly the long list of women that were involved in this is just like wow. It's like kind of like, bro, what are you doing? What were you doing, man? But for with Deshaun Watson, obviously again, you talked about his story, what he continues to do for his community, in the state of Georgia, and then of course, for Clemson, he was a huge. I mean, people love to talk about Trevor Lawrence. People love to talk about Dabo Swinney, but I think that you look at a guy like Deshaun Watson. I feel like he changed the program. I feel like he made them into a national power, especially beating Alabama. Sadly, but he beat Alabama, but and really kind of changed the course of history for that program.
Mhm.
But it's just like when it comes to Deshaun Watson, again, it's just like you're just waiting. You're waiting for the lead to come down because whether if
Yeah.
he's innocent or not, the NFL is a brand and it wants to protect their brand. And we've seen in so many cases where the NFL has suspended a player before the sentence was given, and then all of a sudden we find out you know the person was innocent all along, but the NFL just the NFL for the most part just doesn't really care whether they're innocent or not. They want to try to protect their brand. They want to try to protect their image. And you're right. If they continue to try to let a player like Deshaun Watson, go loose, a guy that's been involved in these type of cases, and involving disputes that the NFL truly hates. I mean, if there's anything that the NFL hates, is cases like this. It's just like you're just waiting at some point for the NFL to finally kind of come down and to finally kind of just make their stand and just give Deshaun Watson suspension now. Whether if it's a year-long suspension, I think we'll see. Maybe it's 4 games, maybe it's 5 or 6 games, maybe it's about a year. But I mean, we've seen harsher cases where you're banned permanently. I mean, they put you on the list, and that's it. So obviously, we're gonna find out about it. Deshaun Watson, again, for the most part, he settled 20 of the cases, and obviously the 4 women they've taken a major stand for it, like you just mentioned a little bit earlier, and there's a possibility of more women. But we talked about it before. I mean, Jimmy Haslam, the Cleveland Browns, they put themselves in this position. Probably the ones that hurt the most are them, because whether if Deshaun Watson is whether if he's ever going to play again, he's going to get his guaranteed money. He's going to because for the most part, $60 million. That's what you guaranteed him. 60 plus is what you guaranteed him, and he's going to get that money either way. So,
Mhm.
Jimmy has them in the Browns organization. They put themselves in this position because they wanted to gamble. They saw Deshaun Watson on the market, but there's a reason why the Dolphins never touched him. Because if Deshaun Watson never had these, if he never would have had these settlements, the Dolphins would have been picked up on him. There's no
Yeah.
doubt in my mind. Listen, I love Tua to death. I'm the biggest. I'm a huge Bama fan. I've been a huge supporter of Tua ever since he played at St. Louis and Honolulu. But
Mhm.
there is no doubt in my mind that if Deshaun Watson never had these settlements, he would have been a Dolphin at this point, and we would have had a discussion probably still to this right now, even about who the best quarterback in the AFC East is. Is Josh Allen, is Deshaun Watson? Is it the Dolphins or the Bills is going to win the? Well, that's what we would have been talking about for the next 5 to 10 years. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, like I said, all these settlements have come into play, and now you got the Browns that are kind of just Baker Mayfield doesn't want to be there. He still wants to be traded. There's, I don't, I think he did show up to mini camp, but for the most part, he doesn't want to be there. And now you kind of create this tension between Baker Mayfield and the rest of the locker room and the organization. And then there's Deshaun Watson, who we don't even know if he's going to be, we don't know how many games he could potentially be suspended. They put themselves in a hole where they could be playing with their third string quarterback for the majority of the year. And with the talent and with the amount of talent that they have, they could miss the playoffs. And this could be detrimental for them for not just this year, but potentially for the next year or two. So, if there's anyone that's really hurt by this, it's definitely the Browns organization, a little bit hurt more by it. But again, for Deshaun Watson, again, I feel bad because he truly did believe that he was innocent, that he wanted to stand by his toe and stick with it. But unfortunately, these cases, man, especially with our system, I mean, these cases can go on for years. I mean, these cases can go on for a very, very long time. So, it's interesting. It's extremely interesting to watch, and at this point, we're just waiting for the hammer just to be dropped.
Yeah, agreed. And speaking of that hammer dropping, like the one thing I'm just so I'm just so up in the air about is like, how much time is he going to get? I mean, we've seen Kareem Hunt get half a season for, you know, assaulting a woman who, yes, may have said some choice words to him, but assaulted a woman on camera. But we've also seen Calvin Ridley get suspended for an entire season for betting on football games that his team was playing in while he was injured. So, but we've also seen, and I was going to bring this part up, the NFLPA is really vouching for Deshaun because, their stance is, well, okay, yes, maybe he's being alleged of these actions, but Robert Kraft, Justin, I'm not sure if that was 2019 or 2020, but had allegations against him that, I mean, really just got swept under the rug essentially.
Yeah.
I don't believe he even served any time suspension. I'm not even sure if he got fined for that. So honestly, like, so I get it. I get it from the standpoint of the NFLPA because I think the what they're fighting for is bigger than the Deshaun Watson situation. Like I believe, holding um, the owners accountable just as much as the players are held accountable. I do believe that is a big deal, but at the same time too, like like the PR from that is going to be awful, and not just from just from a semantic standpoint. Like to think that you know Deshaun Watson might not get suspended because Robert Kraft didn't get suspended. That's not. I don't think that's sending the right message either way. Maybe you retroactively fine Robert Kraft, whatever the case is. But like I said, I truly don't think that the fact that because Robert Kraft wasn't punished that we shouldn't punish Deshaun. No, like they both should have been punished. Especially if there's any validity to what they were being accused of. But at the same time, too, we can't compare apples to apples. This is really apples and oranges. Yes, this was, two separate sexual misconduct, sexual allegation, situations, but they really are two different things. So I just hate that they're being compared that way. But like I said, I'm just, very much like you. Like I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know where everybody's feeling. Where everybody's landing on terms of the suspension because it's really all over the place at this point.
Yeah, man. So, like I said, it's a crazy situation. It's something that we're definitely gonna follow for a minute until this thing finally kind of gets dropped, and then we'll kind of recap it, and then I think that kind of will just be, I wouldn't say really the end of the saga, but for the most, because again, there could be way more stuff that can happen about this, but it's something that it's gonna be a big topic in the NFL for a while, man. So definitely stay tuned with us if you guys are kind of interested in this type of talk. Like I said, Buffalo FamBase Sports. Again, we're live 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6:00 Central Time, 4:00 if you're, of course, on the West Coast. Again, we cover pretty much everything from sports. We're going to talk about NFL. We're going to talk about NBA. We just talked about the draft a little bit earlier on. We're going to talk about some other sports topics, especially leading down the summers. I mean, baseball is in the process. We still got Stanley Cup Finals going on between Tampa and Colorado. So there's going to be a lot more sports talks that we're going to talk about. But we're also going to talk about college football a little bit here because we got that in the title. And, again, Kyrie's an Ohio State fan. I'm an Alabama fan. So we definitely got to talk a little bit more about college. So with the season kind of coming up, Athlon did not release their top 25 or ESPN. They also didn't release the top 25. 27 Sports has. But for the most part, we're kind of waiting on that to happen. But I do want to kind of get your predictions for the college football playoff. Again, there's a lot of powerhouse teams, but there's also a few other teams that are kind of been creeping up. I mean, you got USC, you got Utah. There's been some potential Texas chatter. Kind of give me your thoughts about it and about the CFP and kind of what teams do you think could also be some dark horses that can sneak up and potentially surprise a lot of people going into 2022.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the CFP is, it's very conflicting because I'm a proponent of, I want to see this CFP expand to 8 teams.
Oh yes, please.
Very much so, very much so. I don't want to hear, oh well, the 1 seed would kill the 8 seed. That's not what we're here to discuss. It's got to be a more fair system. I'm glad that last year we did see 2 SEC teams make it. I'm glad that we got to see teams with multiple losses make it. Or teams. There were each. I believe each team outside of Cincinnati had a loss. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Multiple teams with losses. So that was an encouraging thing as well. To see that playoff it get to a point where it's not, oh man, we lost the game, so we're not going to make the playoff. Like that. That's ridiculous. But in terms of the well, just again talking about the playoff. And it's been chalky. It has been. That's something that I don't think we can shy away from. So, obviously, you know it. You being a fan of the Tide. I think Alabama, no question, has got to be one of the teams. That we got to be looking out for. When you got Bryce Young returning. Obviously Jameson Williams is gone, and Brian Robinson is gone as well. But there's still a load of talent on that roster. Tim Williams is still there, or Tim Anderson is still there. My apologies. On defense as well. I think Coach Saban. We talked a little bit about it pre-show. 247 Sports, as of today, actually, Alabama has the second best recruiting class of 2022. So even being behind Texas A&M, and all the NIL deals they're throwing out over there. Bama's still doing their thing in terms of recruiting, and I think, like we said before, Coach Saban gets those guys on campus. Sky's really the limit. I obviously got to mention my guys as well with Ohio State. I think just the
Major
fact that, C.J. Stroud coming back, Travion Henderson coming back, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's still scoring touchdowns as we speak, Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. So that offense is going to be loaded. I'm really excited to see what this offense does. And Ohio State doesn't really, they're going to get tested early. Notre Dame is a team that they'll be playing early on. And I think Notre Dame will be finding itself at that point in the season, but I'm going to get to them later on as well, just so you know, to preview a couple different things. But I really am excited to see that matchup. But yeah, outside of that, I don't think Ohio State will really get tested till later in the season. They have to travel to Michigan State and Penn State, and then they'll close up obviously at home against Michigan, at the Horseshoe. So I think Ohio State, just the continuity that they have, and speaking of that continuity, that's why I really like Alabama as well. When you've got obviously reigning Heisman Trophy winner and Bryce Young, but a guy like C.J. Stroud as well, and him having the weapons that he has coming back, I think that really bodes well for both. You mentioned them earlier. I think I don't want to call them a lock, but I truly think a team that we've got to really expect to be in the conversation for CFP is USC. I think first and foremost, Lincoln Riley. I mean, personally, he's probably my favorite coach in college football. I was an offensive lineman, and what he's been able to do with offenses, whether it was Kyler Murray, whether it was Baker Mayfield, whether it was Jalen Hurts, and obviously last year with Caleb Williams, and he just gets to continue rewriting that story with Caleb Williams out in Southern California. But just some of the guys that Coach was able to bring in as well. You talk about first and foremost Jordan Addison, reigning Biletnikoff winner, 17 touchdowns last year with Kenny Pickett. I mean, what a phenomenal talent. You bring in guys like Mario Williams as well, who, obviously showed a connection with Caleb Williams last year. But you also get Travis Dye from Oregon, former Pac-12 running back, as well as Austin Jones from Stanford. So, I mean, we really might see one of the best offenses in the country, for the Trojans this year. And they've been trying to figure out the quarterback position for a long time, whether it was Keaton Slovis, Matt Barkley, um, Mark Sanchez, so many guys over the years who, have tried to continue on that legacy. Matt Sanchez was probably the most successful of the modern era outside of, after the Matt Leinart days and everything like that. But, even then, he, wasn't able to live up to it once he got to the NFL. But again, I think those three teams really stand out to me. Dark horse team, I mentioned it a little bit earlier though with Notre Dame. I think it'll be tough to see what they do early on against Ohio State. I think Ohio State's favored by 14.5 at the moment, and it makes sense. Ohio State has a lot more continuity. Ryan Day will be entering year 3 as head coach. A lot of guys on offense coming back, but I like that Notre Dame has some veteran guys up front on their offensive line. With Jarrett Patterson, Josh Lugg, and Blake Fisher. I'm sorry, and Andrew Kristofic as well at guard. And they have arguably the best tight end in the country as well with Michael Mayer. So when you have a dynamic talent like that, as well as on at the quarterback position, obviously with Jack Cohen going, that's tough. But Tyler Buchner, he got a lot of snaps last year. He showed the ability to run as well. So really interested to see, what these guys do, especially now that Marcus Freeman has taken over, his defensive-minded prowess, having some guys back like Howard Cross and, Jason Adamiola. So I think I do think that Notre Dame will be right in the mix. The toughest thing for them is it's a double-edged sword. It's a blessing and a curse. And you have a schedule where, you bookend it with Ohio State and USC, who are two of the best programs in the country. If you're able to win both of those games, that obviously boosts you up. If you lose one or both, that might throw you off in terms of, some of the other competition you may be playing. But even if you split, which I think they'll split, I think they'll lose the Ohio State game. But I think, they'll be clicking towards the end of the season. And, you got to also look at it from USC's perspective. Notre Dame is a rival at this point, but it's a non-conference rival. So even if they lose that game, let's say they go undefeated throughout the regular season, lose that game, go 11-1, make the Pac-12 title game, win that, 12-1 Pac-12 title game, only losses to Notre Dame, who was a top whatever team at that point, and that still might get them into the CFP. So I really think Notre Dame, they've got some pieces, but again, I'm really excited to see how Marcus Freeman leads that group now that Brian Kelly has taken his accent down to LSU, and and just the fact that they've got, again, I really think when continuity, I bring it back, and I think more so in a sport like football than any other sport, just because of how much goes into it, the complexity of it, playbook, all that, the amount of guys you have on your roster, whatever the case is. I think when it comes to a sport like football and the fact that, with Notre Dame, yes, Brian Kelly is left, but you just promote Marcus Freeman. I think him knowing the defense as well as he has, him being the recruiter that he's shown to be, all that really stands out. And, being able to establish something already with that program, I think it really goes to show that, they're in a good spot. They're in good hands. They're not, this is not, Charlie Weiss, having to replace Charlie Weiss or anything like that. Or having to replace, Beauchamp, or not Beauchamp, but, Newt Rockney or anything like that. So I think they're in a better position now than they've been, and having to replace a coach in a long time. So we'll see how it goes. Just what are your thoughts on it, Jared?
Yeah, man. I will say this. I think Notre Dame is there. I think they're always going to be in the conversation because with Notre Dame, for the most part, they Brian Kelly, I think even though he's at LSU, and again, you just said he took his accent all the way to Baton Rouge. For the most part, he's done a phenomenal job of bringing that program back. I mean, before Brian Kelly got there, they were pretty much just a 7-8 win football team. Just kept making transactions to different coaches after different coach, and all of a sudden Brian Kelly got there and really changed that entire program around. And now you look at a guy like Marcus Williams, who could be better. I mean, he has the potential of being a better coach than what Brian Kelly was, and very similar to what Georgia had with Mark Richt, where Mark Richt kind of brought the program back, but just didn't really get over the hump, and it didn't take until getting Kirby Smart to finally do that. So, we'll see what Marcus Williams does, but man, I hate Notre Dame's schedule, and I really want them to join a conference because. Yeah, again, it's a strong schedule, but I mean, when you look at that schedule, it's just messy. I mean, it's full of ACC teams, Pac-12 teams. You get some mixture of Big Ten teams here and there, and I just want them to just join a conference because you look at 2020, even though it was a COVID year. I mean, they really, for the most part, the benefits were in their favor because for the most part they were in a conference where they didn't really have that much competition to go against. Really, the only notable name was Clemson, and they ended up beating them with when DJ Uiagalelei started. But even losing, after getting throttled by Clemson in the conference championship, they still made it to the college football playoffs over Texas A&M. And the biggest reason why was because they were in a conference. They were in a conference. They were competing in a conference championship level where A&M didn't even make it to their conference championship. And I feel like that was the biggest difference. And so when you look at some of these other things, especially if Notre Dame were to join the ACC at least right at this moment, I mean, who's to say that they're not going to win, that they wouldn't win the ACC? Because when you look at Clemson, I'm going to talk about Clemson a little bit, but they're lacking at the quarterback position. They're strong pretty much everywhere else, but the offensive line, the quarterback position are the only areas that they're really truly lacking. So I'm honestly not even sure if Clemson would automatically win it. And Wake Forest, for the most part, yes, you got Sam Hartman, but I'm not really too that sure of them. Pittsburgh just lost Kenny Pickett, and they also lost their best receiver in Jordan Addison. And they suffered some huge losses as well. So when you look at that ACC division, I mean, that could have been a division, that could have been a conference where Notre Dame could have took way control on them, but instead they're an independent, and now you have to go against the Stanfords of the world, who are going to get a lot stronger this year. With course with Shaw taking over the reins. I mean, again, you got Ohio State, who you have to take a battle. You got USC, who could potentially be the Pac-12 champions this year. I mean, it's going to be a tough schedule for them, man. And then you have to add in North Carolinas of the world. You have to add in Louisville, who is starting to become a little bit better. NC State, who's no joke. NC State honestly could be the AC championship winner. So, there's a lot of things obviously that we're definitely gonna see. But for the most part, Notre Dame, man, it's like I got them there, but just not really the biggest fans typically of that schedule. As far as some of the other teams, I got to include Georgia. Of course, Georgia pretty much has done Alabama things. I mean, they've done, and I'm not just talking about what new school Alabama. I'm talking about they've won with the old school mentality, and that's just having a game managing quarterback, focusing too much, focusing a lot on the trenches of the offensive line, defensive line, and just winning with their defense and ground attack. So for the most part, Georgia has completely, for the most part, they've done a great job in recruiting. They have now kind of arrived there as kind of one of the two elite teams in the SEC. Again, Georgia will, when you look at their talent, it's full of number one and number two recruiting classes. Again, you look at, Brock Bowers, you look at Darnell Washington, Eric Gilbert can end up being a first-round pick going into next year. Again, I just mentioned Bowers. I think, honestly, again, you talked about with Michael Mayer, and Brock Bowers could, you can make an argument was the best tight end in the nation as a freshman. Was just absolutely incredible for this past year. I mean, you got to look at the quarterback room, as talented as it is. We all know that Stetson Bennett is going to take a charge. The running attack with Branson Robinson and could potentially be the running back there. Defensively, they're absolutely loaded pretty much in every single position, full of talented players, even with the amount of losses that they suffered. So Georgia, well, I think is in my discussion. Again, Alabama, Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, probably the best edge rushing duo in college. You look at their secondary with the addition of Eli Ricks and obviously with Jordan Battle being a potential first-round pick, Brian Branch potentially being a first-round pick, Malachi Moore, and they can put him at the star position, or nickel could potentially be a first-round pick. Really, the only question I have for them is the offensive line. The receivers are stacked, running backs are stacked with Jamar Gibbs transferring to Georgia Tech, but the offensive line was just absolutely horrendous last year. I mean, that's people are not going to talk about this, but in my opinion, taking away the bias, the Bama bias, I honestly truly believe that Bryce Young had had one of the best Heisman seasons in the last decade, because the offensive line was, again, 112th in the nation when it came to giving up pressures, giving up sacks. Bryce Young was the most sacked quarterback, the most pressured quarterback in the SEC. And that's dealing with an inexperienced offensive line, which the year prior, again, you had three guys from the offensive line that were drafted, a couple of dudes that are starting. All three of them actually are starting on all NFL teams. And, that's not even taking away Evan Neal, who was also part of that offensive line as well, that you now lose. So, that's the only position that I question for is the offensive line. But besides that, Alabama is completely loaded. Clemson, it's just the quarterback position for me. DJ Uiagalelei that's the only question mark. Who's going to be quarterback? Is it going to be him, or is it going to be maybe a Kate Klubenek, who you got from Westlake in Texas? Because again, their defensive line might be a little bit better than Alabama's, because you look at Brian Bresee, you look at Miles Murphy, Tyler Davis. There's just so many big names behind that defensive line, and just they have weapons all over the place. With Will Shipley at running back. I just question. It's just the quarterback. Who's going to be playing there? Because everyone, DJ Uiagalelei was the biggest sponsored quarterback before Bryce Young. Before it, like for all these guys got their deals, it was DJ Uiagalelei that got the biggest with Dr. Pepper, because everyone projected that this was the next Ben Roethlisberger, especially against the Notre Dame game in 2020. But he didn't really pan out. So what are you going to work with there? Again, Ohio State. Moody's in the chat right here. He's a humongous Ohio State fan. Again, C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Marvin Harrison Jr. The son of the great Marvin Harrison Sr. I think he's going to have a breakout year for them defensively with Jack Sawyer, JT Tuamalo. I think that those guys can definitely make some huge contributions to their team, because their defense was the only reason why they didn't make the playoffs. If that defense can get slightly better, I think it's good enough for them to get them to the playoffs. And then for the Pac-12, of course, USC dominated the transfer portal. Completely dominated. You mentioned before Travis Dye, Mario Williams, Jordan Addison, and a lot of those guys. The biggest one being Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley's system. But I think the biggest question mark for them is continuity, because you have a bunch of transfers, a bunch of guys that really have never kind of played before, that don't really understand the program, don't understand the tradition of USC. It's kind of like very similar to what Miami was when they had a lot of those transfers. Is can they kind of get it right? How long is it going to take them to kind of get it formulated? And I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting that Oregon is still a big power. Even with the loss of Mario Cristobal going to Miami, Dan Lanning is still a big contributor. He's still a huge contributor to that program, especially coming from Georgia as a defensive coordinator, winning coach. And I think he carries those same principles that Mario Cristobal had to carry coming from Alabama. And I think that Oregon honestly won't change. And that talent with Justin Flo and Noah Sewell is still there. So, in Utah, they just won the Pac-12, and they literally have a majority of the players coming back with Cam Rising, Clark Phillips, the rest of those guys. So I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting with Kyle Winningham and that Utah program there. So, I would say the dark horse for me would be Tennessee, and I would say Tennessee and NC State would be my dark horses. Tennessee, for the most part, no one's really ever talked about them. And again, Dan Hooker had an incredible year for Tennessee, passing the ball. Their offense was extremely explosive. I think Josh Heupel, for his first year being there, had an incredible year, and they obviously could have won 9 or 10 games last year. So we'll see what they kind of can do. NC State's kind of very similar to Tennessee, where no one expected them to be in the position that they were last year. They have one of the best quarterbacks that could end up being a first rounder going into next season, and that ACC conference is kind of weakened. Again, Clemson, quarterback-wise, question mark. Sam Hartman of Wake Forest, they have questions about whether their defense can keep up. And Pittsburgh just lost Jordan Addison. So those are kind of would be my two dark horses kind of there as well, man. So that's kind of – I know it's a little bit too much, but I know I'm kind of dragging on a little bit, but that's just kind of my thoughts about it.
No, never too much, man. I'm glad you expanded on that more. I love college football. It's been tough the last couple of years. I've been – a little bit more focused on UB football and everything like that. So I haven't even been able to get as dialed into it as much as I'd like to. But that's one thing I'm looking forward to this fall, is being able to, lock in a little bit more on college football and just, watch it all. Because there's a lot of I think it is an exciting development knowing that college football as we know it, this year, 2022 is probably the last year that we'll watch college football the same way that we do, because we're going to see, beefed up SEC, with Oklahoma and Texas going down there. That the American Athletic Conference is going to be completely different. I think it's actually going to be not disbanded, but some teams from the American left for, I believe, is the ACC. So yeah, there's going to be a lot. There's a lot of conference realignment going on right now.
The Big 12.
Yeah, the Big 12. My apologies.
Yep,
That's what it is. Yep, the Big 12. Getting some of those schools from the American. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
With Houston, I believe it's. I actually just saw this earlier. Let me take another look. But yeah,
yes, I know it's Cincinnati, and
Houston, Cincinnati. Yeah, Houston, Cincinnati. So it's 6 schools altogether. Houston, Cincinnati. I believe is BYU isn't making the jump yet, are they? No, let's see. We're seeing Charlotte, FAU, North Texas, Rice, and UAB as well. So those schools are actually they're coming over from the they're actually some of the teams that are joining the American Athletic Conference as Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, and yes, BYU is also joining the Big 12.
Yeah, so that's
well. So I was going to say I knew BYU was getting mixed in there. Wait, would you say that?
No, I said that's going to be insane.
Insane, man, insane. So that's why it's going to be interesting to see how the 2022 season plays out, because, like I said, it's probably the last time we'll remember college football as what it is. For what it's been the last 150 plus years now. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited for it, though. The NCAA needed something to shock its system, and whether it's NIL, whether it's the conference realignment, whether it's the player movement, the player empowerment, I think it's all just impacting things. So I'm ready to see what comes with all these new changes.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. But so it's 8:33. Again, we got Justin coming on 9 o'clock, so we're gonna get off here. We're gonna try to give him a little bit of some time to prepare. But yeah, man, like I said, tons of sports topics to talk about today. Because like I said, we pretty much had everything kind of planned out, and then all of a sudden, literally later on today, it was just boom, just bombshell after bombshell after bombshell. So that's the way it is in sports. But we're gonna cover it. That's our job. That's what we love doing. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna try to give you guys the best entertainment as possible, man. But anyway, guys, FamBase Sports for the most part. Check us out 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4:00 if you're on the West Coast, 6:00 if you're on the Central Time. If you're down there in the South, definitely check us out there. We pretty much cover the latest sports topics. We always like to talk about it. Again, we are Bills fans, and trust me, when the season gets closer, we will definitely talk way more about Bills compared to how it is now. But like I said, guys, we're also in a season where, again, you got Stanley Cup Finals. The Buffalo Bandits could potentially win their championship. Sooner or later, we're definitely going to talk about the Buffalo Bandits and kind of the impact. If we can get the title here, get that parade going, that's going to be huge. So tons of sports topics that we're definitely going to cover in the future. So definitely stick with us. And again, other content creators also on Buffalo FamBase Sports. So definitely check them out as well. Big projects coming. And I keep mentioning this, and then again, I appreciate everyone that's coming from the Gen Sports YouTube channel that's coming over here showing us a lot of love. We definitely appreciate it. If you're on Twitter and Facebook, again, we appreciate the love. But then, last thing I'm going to ask for, smash the like button and subscribe if you possibly can. Helps us out, helps out the YouTube algorithm. Again, not only us, but other content creators for Buffalo FamBase. It definitely help us out in the long run as well. But anyway, guys, man, this is Jared Call, a.k.a. Gen Sports with Kari Demos. And we will catch you guys next week on Tuesday.
You are now tuned in to the newest Bills Mafia production, FamBase Sports. Join Jarek Hall and Kari Demos as they take you around the world of sports every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on the official network of the original Bills Mafia.